On this episode of Richard Reminisces about 2 years ago, I recently purchased a new phone and realized I had a bunch of footage from a hike on Catalina Island. Um, I'll include that footage here for documentation purposes. The hike took place over 3 days, covered about 45 miles, and with some serious elevation gain. I definitely felt this hike. This trip took place in 2023 during Memorial Day weekend. Actually, immediately before Memorial Day weekend, I flew from Portland to LA to visit my friend Tony. And during the work week, I did this hike on Catalina Island. Um, I attempted to use the lovely mass transit system in order to get to the pier, and that did not work well. And so I panicked and purchased a lift ticket and got there on time. Um, Here's the Catalina Express Pier. I don't have any pictures from here, but it's a relatively um, isolated because it's near a cargo port. So drive in, get dropped off, lovely little terminal, and wait to get on the boat. On the way out of the LA harbor, you do get to pass the battleship Iowa, which was a fun sight. And then once you get to open ocean, the boat can really put the hammer down and move aggressively. The way the ferry goes is it first docks at Avalon, which is the largest settlement on Catalina Island. But that was not my destination on day one. I sat through the unloading process on Avalon and then was taken to my departure, which is the Two Harbors settlement on the other side of the island. It's a relatively low population settlement. It's got a little general store, and I think there's a restaurant attached to the general store, and a few permanent residents. However, ultimately, it's maybe in the hundreds of people. And this is where I started day one on my hike at approximately, that was probably noon or 1 p.m. Switching to Kumut, I can better articulate where I was hiking. So day one was the northern loop of the Catalina Island. Started at Two Harbors, and I was doing a loop in the counterclockwise fashion. The first section out of Two Harbors is relatively flat and approachable. You are hiking on the road. I did pass a Boy Scouts of America camp, which was encouraging or fun. Since I was in the Boy Scouts, this would have been a cool destination if you live in LA. As you hike along, you reach approximately the northernmost camping site, which is a beach, Parsons Landing. I did not have reservations here. This would be a lovely campsite. After you pass Parsons Landing, the road, because even though this is a trail, it is really a repurposed road, gets much more aggressive. You do some serious elevation gain up and down, and then perhaps the most difficult part of the entire hike is this approach on the northwestern tip of the island. And this was not technical, but it was steep enough that you actually need high traction shoes. This is also where I took some footage because the clouds were rolling over the cliff face, and it was really pretty. I was also truly exhausted. I was able to grind through that first day, which was about 20 miles long, and camped actually at Two Harbors again. There's a campsite off to the east of the Two Harbors settlement. From there, the rest of the trip was not nearly as aggressive, but I already had set the tone. Yesterday, I hiked that, which is really far away now. Hiked that, and it was miserable. Another steep hike out of Two Harbors was actually my easiest day. as I hiked to the Little Harbor campground. So departing from Little Harbor, it's another aggressive hike up, although this is much more enjoyable than that first day. A bit less steep, and you're no longer on roads for most of this hike. You're going between trails. Past the airport in the sky, I was able to get a sandwich there. That was a nice watering and eating position. And I actually had a reservation at the campsite Blackjack, which is the interior site of the island. However, I was feeling really good, and I knew I was time constrained, so I wanted to press onward. So I decided to continue past the Blackjack campground and target the campsite in Avalon itself. This was a little bit of a mistake. By skipping Blackjack Campground, I signed up for a strenuous day number 3. Debatably worse than day number 1, although they were both very stressful. I ultimately did probably about 19 miles, and I was showing up at the final campground after dark, which was interesting. I did pass a wild buffalo, which cost me probably an hour because it's difficult. If they're in your way, you don't walk next to them and you don't negotiate with them. So the guy was in the way of my path, and luckily a local tour company drove me in their tour bus past the buffalo. So I had a, I don't know, quarter-mile extension for my trip.
I don't think I'm going to finish the trail today because it keeps going. That road is really the trail, or it's the little thing on the side of the road.
So one benefit of my very long day number 3 is that I was showing up relatively late into Avalon. However, since the daylight, it's Memorial Day weekend, I have lots of daylight, I still had no issue seeing. And so I can't route it on this map because it was technically a private path. I was able to walk through the back side of the botanical gardens. And what I didn't realize is that it was already closed for the day. However, since I was walking in from the uphill side, they don't close those gates, and I was able to take a nice leisurely stroll through the botanical gardens by myself before arriving at the front gate and realizing that it was turnstiled and blocked. There was a free exit I was able to get through. And then that put me at the Hermit Gulch campground in Avalon probably around 8:30, 9 p.m. And I did cheat a little bit. Even though I had bought a campsite elsewhere, I didn't have a reservation here, and it was so late there was no camp host for me to talk to. So, set up my camp on an empty site. It was relatively quiet, and then I was out of there first thing in the morning, which was good. Even with an early morning, at my slow rate, since I was exhausted, I strolled through Avalon in order to get to the ferry terminus with about an hour to spare. I could have been a little bit more lazy or maybe gotten breakfast, but otherwise it was good that I was on time so I could get back to LA. Overall, I was surprised by how stressful this trip was. I thought an island off of LA, where stereotypically people go to picnic, is supposed to be an easy hike. However, especially the northern island elevation is just crazy. Um, and even the rest of the island, there's lots of ups and downs. So this hike is definitely stressful. If you live in LA, it might be a good place to go for a gear check hike at the beginning of the season. Maybe don't do the full island. You can do sections. For the rest of the country, I don't know if I recommend it as like a destination hike. However, since it is an island and it's at relatively low latitude compared to the rest of the United States. This hike is available most of the year. And so, like Memorial Day here in Oregon, most hikes still have snow, whereas this was perfectly viable. I also was very lucky that it was overcast almost every single day. And that allowed me to hike without sunscreen, and there is almost no shade on the island. So I strongly suspect if you were here in a summer day without cloud cover, it would be brutal with limited water sources, lots of sun, and you need to be ready for that. Overall, I'm glad I did it, and now I'm documenting it so I can remember it forever.